Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Durst. I've been hiring, firing, and mentoring executives, frontline employees, interns, and job seekers in companies around the world through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. I work with people in Hong Kong, India, Australia, and across the United States. What sets them apart? A lot, but there's more they have in common. And one of those commonalities is transition is a part of life. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions that are big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet, the people who can make the difference that matters to you right now. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big change. The insight track you're going to access during our future episodes is better than a crystal ball. It's the exact information you need to take that next step. Whether you're a new grad applying for your first professional job, someone looking to transition your work experience into a promotion, launching your own company, or maybe even starting to plan your retirement, you're in transition, and this series is for you. We all know transition can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have VIP access to the future you want. Are you tired of the uncertainty of being passed up? We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to the front of the line. So, if change is on your horizon, or maybe just the thought of change, you won't want to miss this discussion. It could be the exact edge you need to turn transition into an amazing opportunity. Thomas Goonan, thank you so much for joining us today on People in Transition. I appreciate your joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thomas, some may not know you as well as I do. Why don't you tell me just a little bit about yourself and what we want to talk about here today?
Sure. So I'm a human resources generalist for a company called ICOS Consulting. Our company is a railway engineering and energy engineering consulting firm. We have 19 offices worldwide. I've been in human resources now in total for a little bit over 4 years, from internships to now, and I'm a recent graduate of 2018, and that's pretty much it.
Today's episode, we really want to talk about and spend time thinking through the issues of going from college to that first job. Thomas, as he's just said, fairly recent college graduate, and we thought that he could speak to that. So, Thomas, my first question, and I have a series of these that I'm going to go through with you, and feel free to answer in your own experience or what you've seen others do. And so my first question is, how did you use the Career Center at your college? And do you think you could have used them even better?
I definitely think I could have used them better. I was in an interesting position in college, actually, because when I first started going to college, my career path goals were much, much different than they are today. And so I had come to New York. I was originally living in Florida. I was born in New York. I was born in Staten Island, and I moved to Florida for high school. I came back for college because I wanted to study fashion. And so I was very passionate about pursuing a job in the fashion industry. I went to a college that my cousin had taught at, LAM College, and it was only a year in that I decided I wanted to do human resources. And I knew with my college that I could still study there and work in human resources and study human resources. They had a great management program, but something that was very important about my university was their career center. And it's actually one of the most important pieces or components of the way that my college was set up. And actually, I'm teaching there right now as an adjunct faculty member, working with that exact department and career center. And so at my university, we were required as students to take 3 internships, the final one being a co-op in order to receive our degree. And so using the Career Center was very important just from the start. And there were classes that were synced up to the Career Center. One of those I teach right now is Career Prep. It's the first course you take prior to going into your first internship as a student. And for me, because I was working in human resources, I was interning in human resources, I decided that there were more opportunities in fashion with the Career Center, but I took the advice of the Career Center and I used it to shape my job search, but I didn't use the Career Center exactly for the jobs that they had open, but I definitely think it was important.
Thomas, how can talking with professors about what you're looking for, their input, help you in your search?
Their experiences. What made me realize I wanted to go into human resources was my human resources professor. She had worked in the pharmaceutical industry in HR for multiple years, and after I took her class, I sat down with her and I spoke to her about what I could see for myself and for my future. And we had an ongoing conversation throughout the semester of what my career path could look like in pursuing human resources. And I wouldn't have known what a trajectory for my career could have been were it not for the conversations I had with her or with any professor, really. They're there as a guide and they're there as an example for what you could see yourself as after being in an industry for some time. So having relationships with professors is very important, especially when you first start, because they're going to see your progress in college and they're going to see how you can come out to be successful.
What about job boards? How did you use job boards in your job search?
I think it's really important with job boards, especially just applicant tracking systems or ATSs, to understand how they work and to understand how you can use them to your advantage. One thing that I teach my students these students are freshmen in college, so they're just coming out of high school, they're coming into the university, they know that they want to do an internship in the fashion industry or in business, and they don't really know how to go about finding that first opportunity. And so from exposure, one of the first things that they know about is LinkedIn. So they hear their friends, they hear some professors talking about this platform, this social media job board, and they know what it is, but they don't know how to use it. Something that I really stress with my students is that whenever you apply on LinkedIn, whether you're applying directly on LinkedIn to a job posting or it's taking you to some other portal with some other system, that system is going to be capturing the data that's in your resume. Look at the job description, look at your skills, be honest to yourself with your skills and the capabilities that you have, but try to see how you can sync up best the opportunity at hand, the description, with your resume, because that's going to put you to the front of the line in front of all the other candidates, but also being able to build a story and maybe making connections to an individual. We see all the time these postings on LinkedIn. We see all the time a lot of companies we want to be part of or think we want to be part of. Try to find someone in the organization that's either human resources or in the same field that you would like to go in, and maybe send them a message. Try to connect, send a message, try to build a personal relationship or some rapport. You never know what the response could be, and if it's positive, you have a connection built. If it's not a job or an internship, it's a bridge that you can still use at some point later down the road.
Thomas, you talked about social media. What if you have some bad stuff on your social media? That spring break down in Florida that pictures have been taken or something of that nature. What should you do?
It's at your discretion how you want to go about your social media, but I think if you want to keep your social media for just friends, make it private. That's fine. Share it with a select few people that you think would be interested in that. If there are things that you find questionable, maybe take it off if you don't feel totally comfortable having it. It depends on how you want to use social media. Some people like to use social media to boost a brand, and at that point, they have a lot of brand engagement. Some people like to have it just for personal, for friends and family. Maybe keep it private, keep it amongst them, but think about this for LinkedIn. A brand is very important, and a brand tells a story, and you are a brand. You're selling your own personal brand to employers. So where they see you, sell the brand effectively.
Thomas, networking is a word that strikes fear and dread in the hearts of many job seekers. How do you approach networking, and how do you help others approach networking?
I don't think networking has to be so dreadful. It's funny because in college and when I graduated and went to teach, the term networking, I think just in the fact that it was used so often became dreadful, but the actual act itself, if you're interested in the networking, isn't dreadful at all. And so being able to build a meaningful conversation and relationship with someone will spark interest. So I always suggest to my students, look at people that you're interested in connecting with. Don't feel obligated to connect with someone if there really is no connection or no common interest, because it's going to feel as though it's dreadful. Find a common point between you and the person you're trying to engage with. Continue a very organic conversation. It doesn't have to be as planned out as we think it needs to be. A lot of the times we talk about an elevator pitch, and an elevator pitch is good, but what about your elevator pitch, or what about your story is actually truthful and honest and can convey a good message that makes you relatable? So I think networking doesn't have to be so dreadful. It's just how you go about it and your intention.
Thomas, did you create a customized resume depending on the company or who you're speaking with and change it around dependent upon the audience?
I would. When I first graduated college, I was doing that, and that's actually how I was able to get my job at ICOS. I saw specific points about recruitment and just about organization, and I was able to take those points and put those into my resume. I think it's important to do that, especially in the beginning, because like we talked about this ATS and beating the ATS, or being able to have the ATS recognize certain points or skills that will bring you to the front of, let's say, an applicant pool. It's really important to customize because it's going to highlight the skills that the employer is looking for.
Thomas, many interviews today are done, at least that first interview is done via telephone. How did you, or how do you teach your students to improve your telephone interviewing skills?
I just recommend to them to go about it as though it were a normal face-to-face interview, to be in an environment where they would be having a face-to-face interview. And if they can't be in that environment, then just to be in an environment that makes them feel comfortable. But a lot of people have the upper hand with phone call interviews because you can easily put your notes right in front of you about the employer. You can easily put your notes about your skills, your resume. If you have any questions, you can put any questions, and you're able to reference those very easily. I would say try to be in an environment where you're calm without distraction, like we're having our conversation today. And I would also recommend them to take the time to have their questions for the interviewer in front of them as well, because that's also going to build a lot of rapport in the interview.
Thomas, how can you work on your anticipating and preparing for the typical questions that you might be asked during an interview so that you come across with those strong personal answers?
So I actually had a very good kind of recommendation from someone who I follow on LinkedIn. Her name is Madeline Mann. I don't know if you know her. She posts a lot about different job seeking tools and methodologies that you can use. One of the ones that I found so interesting, and her YouTube channel and all her social media, by the way, it's Self-Made Millennial. She suggests to create a story toolbox. I think this is so interesting. Make a story toolbox of certain scenarios that you've come into within the past, maybe 5 years or 2 years, depending on how long you've been with a specific job or internship, and highlight certain events where maybe you've had an issue with a coworker, maybe you've had an issue with deadlines, maybe you've been successful in a certain project. If you can just have the basis of certain stories or experiences in front of you, it can help guide the conversation, especially since a lot of employers are using behavioral-based interview questions. It can be challenging to answer those off the fly, but if you have some type of reference or story toolbox, like Madeline Mann speaks about, it can really help to shape the conversation well.
Talk about those behavior-based interview questions. Explain what that is and how best to deal with those.
Well, behavioral-based interview questions are really trying to assess how you would react to certain situations. So what the employer is trying to figure out is how can you react in a certain situation and how does that translate to what they're looking for as an employer. The most important thing to do in that case is just to be honest, be truthful, act from your own experiences. They know what they're looking for, so as long as you go in the direction in which you're confident and which you're truthful, the match will come about. And the most important thing to do there as well is STAR answers, so situation, task, action, and result, essentially framing the situation in a way that goes from point A to point B and shows that you were able to come across a situation or just come across a scenario. You were able to identify that there was a need within that scenario that needed to be met. You acted based on that need, and then you were able to come to a viable result that impacted either yourself or others. So being able to take not only a scenario, but shape it into a story is very important, and it's going to convey to the interviewer as well that you can build cohesion within your experiences in your previous jobs or internships.
What about that killer question? Tell me what your weaknesses are. How do you deal with that?
So I actually found something very interesting that I use with my students. So we as a department, we use StrengthsQuest by Gallup, which is a specific company that gives you your top 5 strengths based on answering a series of questions. So I think a lot of us knows Myers-Briggs, but in this scenario, we're just looking specifically at your strengths in relation to your career. Something that Gallup brings up in StrengthsQuest when you have your top 5 strengths is also that there are dark sides to your strengths, meaning that a strength is not always going to be a strength to someone else or in a certain situation. So if I say that I am very ambitious, I want to convey the point that I am willing to take on many opportunities. I'm willing to look at things very openly and I'm open to new ideas. But to another regard, being ambitious can sometimes deflect away from focusing in on certain projects, certain deadlines, certain tasks that I need to complete because my vision is too wide for me to go deep into a specific focus. Not only have I taken the strength and expressed why it's a strength in my regard, but I've also taken that strength and used it as a weakness. I think this is really good because it shows that there are 2 sides to each quality that you have, but it also shows the employer that you think about yourself not only positively, but also critically, and you recognize that you have weaknesses that also could be viewed as strengths.
Thomas, if you don't have any work experience and you're looking for your first job, how can you make up for that? What should you do?
Rapport and confidence. Confidence being one of the most important things that I stress to my students when they first walk in the door, because I think a lot of us, especially when we're younger in an industry, we're just starting out in an industry, we tend to lack that sort of seriousness or confidence when it comes to viewing ourselves as professionals in the workplace. We always compare ourselves to peers, to others that are years out than we are when we first graduated. And so we're always looking at them and their skills and saying, well, I don't have that, so my skills aren't as valuable or as worthy as that person that I'm kind of assessing myself to or comparing myself to. Something that I really stress is that we are all young professionals. We are professionals. We take classes, we do internships, we write projects, we write papers, and we have the ability to convey ourselves as professionals in the workplace from a very early stage in our lives. But a lot of us tend to shy away from that because in comparison to others that may have graduated at an earlier point, it doesn't match what they are or what they've accomplished. But I always try to stress, you've accomplished a lot, whoever you are, whatever phase you are in your career. So you have just as much as a right to be confident and assured of your skills as that person does.
Some states still allow the recruiter to ask about salary expectations. How do you respond to the salary compensation question if the company is asking for what you need versus they're telling you about the range they're willing to pay?
Well, I think what's important is just to express that what's most important for you is the fit. You want to be connected and feel valued within your workplace. And if you know your skills, you know that you'll be compensated properly. And then at a later point in time, when you get into the interview process, you can start to bring in your research and your findings to show that what you are looking for is in range with your skill sets based on the facts that you have found. Now, a lot of recruiters, they don't want to waste your time, so of course, they'll try to get the information from you right away. If that's the case, just make sure that you come with your information. Make sure you've done your research. There are many free websites where you can do that. Salary.com, for example, is a great website. Just make sure that you have some backup material to emphasize and to justify why you deserve a certain amount. And then in asking it, it will make more sense for you to be asking it because you've done your research.
Does appearance count in the in-person interview?
It does. And, I always toggle, should it? I think it's a mentality of seriousness going into a job. It also depends on the company culture, of course. Every culture is different. Every culture expects different things and values different things. So that's just a question of values aligning. If you are interested in being in tech and you're interviewing for a finance role and you show up with a plaid shirt and jeans, I think that the finance role, I could be wrong, there are finance companies that will allow whatever, but if it's an industry or a culture where there's not a fit and you show up dressing a way that they don't have expectations for, there's not going to be a match. So that's why from the beginning of a search, it's very important. Is there a culture fit? Is there a match? And gauging that from the very start before you even get to that point to make sure that you're in line with what they're looking for, whether it be dress, the way that you talk, the way that you present yourself, all of these different factors.
How might you find out the appropriate dress before you go into that in-person interview?
You could look at company photos. You could just look at, if you know the type of industry too, you might get a sense of how they dress. Also just ask questions. I think it's important to ask questions, even if you think that the question is, maybe something that normally wouldn't have been asked. Something I try to stress too in my courses are you are interviewing the interviewer just as much as they are interviewing you. So you have all the right throughout the process to ask questions to make sure there's a match, because on their side, in terms of your skills, there could be a great match, but in terms of what you're looking for, let's say with the team or with the culture, you don't know if there's a match because you haven't asked the right questions. So don't be afraid to, from the start, ask questions that will give you more guidance into what the culture could be for an organization, as well as for the people you're working with, because that's very important. The people that you work with sometimes can be more valuable than the work itself. If you have a great team, that's going to supersede a lot of the things within your role. I think that's very key.
Thomas, how did you follow up after a telephone or in-person interview with the recruiter or the hiring manager?
It's funny because many people don't send thank you emails as much as you would. It's really important to send a thank you email at least 24 hours after any point of contact that you have in terms of an interview. So whether it be just a small thank you email or, being able to send an email where you can ask questions and justify your skills. Something that I suggest and I like to do is if you have an interview and let's say you talk about a specific issue or a specific problem within the role or the organization, addressing that problem in the thank you letter to show that you were looking at solutions. So if someone brings up that maybe they, let's say, are having issues with their payroll, they're using different systems, and they need to find a process to merge two systems into one. You take those notes mentally, you write them down, and then in the thank you email after, you talk about how it was a pleasure to speak with you. You bring up your skills, highlight why you would be a good fit, and then also say, look, I found this article about how you can merge two systems into one. I think it would be interest. Given the challenge that your company is facing, I think this would be a good suggestion. What do you think? That builds a rapport and it shows that you're already providing solutions for a role that you even haven't got the job to yet. So being proactive in that sense is going to put you much further amongst others.
Thomas, someone once told me that any job is better than no job. How do you feel about that?
I don't agree with that. I think it's very important to find a fit. If you're not passionate about what you do, then there's really no, I understand to that point in the sense that, you have to make money, you have to make a living, but at the same time, if you can find pockets of joy within what you do and pockets of interest within what you do, it's going to make the work not feel like work. Let's say even you're in a situation where you're at a job right now and you want to do a pivot in career and you're not interested in the work that you're doing right now, go for certifications, take classes, try to be proactive outside of the working hours so that when the time comes, you can make that transition easily and then go into what you would like to do. So I always say it's a season, it happens. You might be in a situation where you're not happy or where you think you could do better. Work towards getting out of that season into something greater.
What are your feelings about relocation? When should you ask that of yourself, whether you're willing to relocate? And what are some of the factors that you should consider in making that decision?
I think it comes up at different points of people's lives. Not everyone is open to relocating. I would say what's most important is looking for the right opportunity. So some people, they want to stay in a specific region and they'll find an opportunity within that region. Some people don't care about the region. They just want to find the right opportunity. What I would consider is there good access to other jobs within that region? The reason why I say that is because now in COVID, we really don't know what's going to happen in the next few months. So let's say you were to go to a new job in a new region, you relocate, something happens, COVID, there's a lot of instability, you lose your job. How are you going to bounce back from that? So that's a very big change. Also, just being close to things that you enjoy, whether it be travel, whether it be nature, hiking, you like being in a city. It's really up to you what you search for and what you look for. And actually, one person that we both know, Corey Haber, she had suggested to me too, if you're interested in relocating, look at the Chamber of Commerce in those cities that you're interested in relocating to. Try to build connections over there before you even go there so that you have a place that you can kind of gravitate towards prior to even arriving.
Thomas, how has COVID changed the entire job search process?
There's just more of a scarcity, and with that comes having to be more competitive and having to put yourself in front of others in terms of ways that you can show your skill sets. Being unconventional. This is a very unconventional time. We don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. We don't know what 6 months is going to look like from now. So it's okay to get out of your comfort zone a little, if that means reaching out to a recruiter directly, if that means trying to set up some virtual meetup with colleagues that you wouldn't have normally done to try and foster more relationships, or just trying to get more comfortable with doing things like this, phone interviews, phone calls, video calls, so that you can try to adapt to the market. I think it's unfair to say, and especially when COVID first started, a lot of people were asking each other, oh, okay, well, what are you doing to try and get back to normal? Or what have you been doing during COVID that has made you productive? I think it's unfair to ask that because COVID affects people in different ways. And I think that we have to recognize that. But at the same time, trying to at least work unconventionally to highlight ways you can be different in a job search is important, because a lot of people are going to be applying to jobs more so than before. A lot of jobs are going to be open for a long time. A lot of requisitions won't be filled for a long time. So within that period, finding ways to connect with others.
Job searches, transition is a stressful time for many. Thomas, what are some ways that you keep grounded so that you can deal with the stress better?
I would phrase this question more to the students that I teach, because they're really the ones that I think are facing the stress when they're searching for internships. So something that I would recommend to them is just understanding that this is not a normal time period. We're changing the way that work looks, and the economy is changing, and the way that industries are reacting to how COVID affects them. So it's okay to be stressed out. I don't think it's a bad thing to be stressed out. It's just a product of what's going on, but at the same time, being able to look through that and still be confident in your skills, still see yourself as a young professional, and then walk through any opportunity given that type of confidence can maybe alleviate some of that stress.
Any resources, books that you think would be particularly helpful to a person coming out of school and looking at their first job?
Well, I would say it's important right now just to look at your strengths. I think a lot of us are at a time when we feel very weak. Because of COVID, a lot of students are graduating, they're unable to find jobs, they don't really know kind of where their future lies. I would recommend the resource Strengths Finder by Gallup. If you can take the time to fill out that survey, look at your strengths, it's going to give you some insights as to the type of person that you are. And I think it's going to help you feel grounded in your skills and remind you of why you're in the position you're in today, why you're looking for the job that you're looking for. Hopefully that can offer some motivation during the search.
What are the 3 things that you want our listeners to take away from today's episode that we talked about?
I would say remember to be confident. Remember that you as a student, if you're listening to this, you are a young professional. You do have the skills, you do have the qualities that employers are looking for. The second thing I would recommend or remind the listeners is just to build connections and to build honest connections. We talked a bit about networking and the dread around networking. I don't think it has to be dreadful, and I think if there's any time to be building conversations and building rapport, especially for students, it's now. So just being open and being transparent and having good values when you go into those conversations. And the final thing that I would impart to the listeners is just to know that it's okay to be stressed, but at the same time, it's good to know your strengths and to find solace within your strengths, because it will give you insight into the type of person that you are and make you feel more confident to be better within your job search.
Thomas, thank you so much. That was really a great overview of that process and of skills and techniques and how to deal with some of the unknowns. I know that the listeners, as I did, will get a great deal out of your thoughts and experiences. Thomas, I thank you so much for your time, for caring and sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. We're working in unprecedented times as the world responds to the recent COVID-19 crisis. The fact is that even those who are not in transition understand it could be right around the corner, next month or a year from now. The purpose of these episodes are to give listeners support and the critical tools to adjust with the winds, wherever they come. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully, perhaps gracefully, or without too many battle scars, survive their own obstacle courses, and can share useful information on how to steady your ship or your world in this uncertainty. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on social media. If you have any questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. I appreciate your time you're investing in sharing these important conversations with me, my guests, and others who are going through life transition. Transitions between jobs, life stages, new entrepreneurial ventures, or whatever life brings. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode of People in Transition.